So, quick summary, okay? I didn't do much with this, but the voters understand it. There haven't been many errors through the years. Candidates change their behavior. They try to maximize the number of votes they get. Voters change their behavior. I think it has worked once in 1995. I don't think there's a lot of promise to elect two using cumulative voting. Possible? Probable? No. Not under existing conditions, okay? Under existing conditions, if past election patterns continue, and I mean that, you know, and we've been fairly stable in terms of the patterns. Unless there's some change, it's probably not going to happen, okay? All right, any questions now, or do you want to wait till take them later?
Any questions for Dr. Aspen?
We're talking, this whole summary is regarding the at-large seats, is that correct?
The at-large. We're not dealing with the district seats at all, just the at-large.
Yes.
You said that there is only, well, we were talking about Eric Turner, but we have two minority leaders at large, Montalongo and Eric Turner are two.
I have focused on the African American group because that's going to be the court case, okay? And so I tended to direct my comments there.
Okay.
Yeah.
The numbers that you represent in your charts, the charts where you indicate the number of minority percentage and the greater the percentage, the more votes there were, does it take into the account the minorities who are running in certain areas? If you have, I know these votes can come from all over the city when you're talking cumulative, but if the number of African Americans in the city, as you represent, are not voting, then what you're saying is that it will never happen unless the number of minorities voting increases. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there are multiple things. There are limits. Okay, I'll send you this presentation. If you get lots of candidates that are equally attractive, okay, that will make it easier. Or this election actually had one of the conditions that favor the election of two, and that is if you get a big wash of the votes up to one or two people, okay, at the top of the ballot, they get a lot of votes, that's going to lower the threshold for the fourth and fifth slots down there. Okay? So the whole series of factors that affect it. And that's why I said, if the conditions that we have seen through all these elections continue, it's possible, but I don't think it's that likely. It's difficult. It can happen, but it's difficult. Yes?
Would you be able to have a mic circulate for people's questions? Because it's hard to hear back here.
Okay.
What is the percentage, if we have a at-large, and we have one district represented by African American, what is, out of how many at-large do we have? 10? Is it 5 and 5? So what is that percentage, if we have two out of that, compared to, what, 12% of the African American population voting? What's the ratio?
That's who's actually, that's my best estimate at that time of who's voting. The voting age population is bigger than that, but the turnout is much lower.
Right. So if we have 20% African American population in Peoria, and we have what, 20% of the city council, or we have less than 20% of the city council?
Well, it'd be 20% with two.
Okay, so it kind of, representation kind of equals it out, correct?
Okay. That's one way of looking at it. Some other folks look at it a little differently.
Okay. Then, and that brings us to issues, as opposed to racial politics. And I guess that's a different conversation.
Your question for me is?
No, just as
Okay. I'm here to give you the facts as I know them to be, okay? And I'll try my best to do that. Okay.
I have a question. When you responded to him, you said that's how you can look at it, but that's not how other people look at it. Can you expand on that?
Other folks will look at.
And the other folks are whom?
Okay. There's lots of opinions out there, okay? There are lots of opinions, and I'll let these folks speak for themselves if there's anybody here who wants to make that argument. But not only looking at the present, too, but also think ahead, okay? Look down the road. Are we going to see demographic changes? Is the Peoria population going to become even more heavily minority dominated in terms of a percentage? So you have to think ahead too. But I know some have looked at what is the total percentage of the last census in terms of majority voters, Brad?
62% white Caucasian in the last census, if I'm correct, Pat. There's some charts back there that you guys can look at. And something that I found hard to believe is that Hispanics, as far as the federal census is concerned, are not considered a minority. Which is 5%. So, but it is, I mean, when you think about that demographically, you know, we have a very significant minority population. And so, you know, that again gets to the, what I believe is the essential question is the current system for electing city council members the best way to go for the future of the city of Peoria, given the demographics of the city. And it may be that we want to stick with the current system. It may be that we want to look at alternatives. Why don't we go ahead, and we'll have plenty of time to either ask Dr. Aspen or Pat Landis or myself questions. But I'd like Pat to go ahead and present some of the census data, because I think that would be good, and what's happened with the redistricting committee to date.
Oops, I'm sorry. I should have warned you. I
around.
was behind you. Thank you very much. My name is Pat Landis, and I'm the director of the planning department for the city of Peoria. And it's nice that Brad said I know a lot about census. I have people that work in my department that know everything about the census. I just know some of the high points. So I'm going to sort of shift topics here and speak on 4 different things. Why are we changing the boundaries? Because we have to change them. What did the City Council ad hoc committee on redistricting do? Give me some additional information about race and then some sample maps. And then Brad will talk about next steps. The 2010 census showed a population increase of 1.8%. So that's good. It's the first increase that we've had since 1970. I think what's interesting is that's an increase of 3% of the voting age population. And when we work with census numbers to draw districts, we look at the total population. We don't look just at the voting age population. So, this map changed. What happens is every time when the census comes out, it not only gives us an opportunity, but a responsibility that we have to create equal-sized districts as far as population goes. And when this map came out and we looked at it, since 2000, from 2010, there's been significant changes in the districts. And our task as a staff was to work with the committee, and we were supposed to come up with 5 council districts. That's what we have right now, and they have to be of equal population. That goal then is to get 23,001 people into each district. That means that we have to grow the first district by 2,600 some people, grow the second district by almost 2,400, the third district by 1,700, the fourth district by about 1,600, and we need to shrink the 5th district. In the last 10 years, so 10 years ago, we had nearly equal population with only a 5% deviation. In the last 10 years, there's been such a change in the council districts that the 5th district has 10,000 more people than the 1st district, which only has 20,000. So that population shift has happened because between 1970 and 2010, we had a 40% decline in population from the valley and bluffs. That's significant. In fact, there are sections of the valley and bluffs where you have 1 out of every 4 houses that's vacant. So we've had a significant population loss in this area Now, some of that growth is new construction, some of it are people moving into town. And when you look at the city too, you have your greatest density right in the center. So we have low density in the valley area. We have low density over to the east because you have the Bluffs, you have Springdale Cemetery, you have Glen Oak Park. So the second thing to talk about is the City Council Redistricting Committee. I've worked on a couple redistrictings because I've been at the city a long time. And the way that we would usually do this is we get the census data, our people start working on it. It's a lot easier now with computer programs. We come up with several maps. We invite council people in, they look at them, maybe there's some adjustments. We keep going through that process, and finally we have a map and we take it to the city council. I give a lot of credit to the mayor and council that what they wanted to do this time is have a much more transparent process. So they established this committee, and the committee met, and their goal was to come up with 5 districts that were nearly equal. And when we looked at that, we looked at criteria, and what we have to do by law is to come up with nearly equal population, deviation of 5%. We have to be compact, we have to be contiguous. We can't do some of these weird gerrymandering that you see in some other different types of maps. Working with the committee had good public input at several meetings, and they said in addition to being compact and contiguous, they wanted to use major thoroughfares as a boundary. They wanted to keep neighborhoods together. And when they talked about neighborhoods, it wasn't just neighborhood associations. So we came up with some additional maps, came back and had a further refinement. The committee told the staff, we want more emphasis on neighborhoods, less on thoroughfares, because we have one neighborhood group that crosses Knoxville. That made it tough. And they also wanted us to consider growth. During those public hearings, they heard interest from citizens that in addition to just changing the boundaries for the 5 districts to come up with 5 nearly equal population districts, there was interest in examining cumulative voting, there was interest in changing the number of districts, and there was interest in changing the form of government from 5 district council members to 5 at large. The committee made the report to the city council and said, we'll give you an example of a map that appears to work for the 5 districts, but we don't really think it's appropriate as the district council members to just look at this whole area, cumulative voting, number of districts, et cetera. That has to be the council as a whole. So when this went to council, the council said, well, we need a little bit more information on this. Let's defer it for a while, get information from neighborhood groups. And then on October 11th, they decided there really need to be a community-wide discussion. And they thought what was wise that that discussion was not held and conducted by the city of Peoria. So they asked several groups to do this, and Brad with the Institute is taking the leadership on that. But Brad, what are the other groups that are involved with this?
It is the Neighborhood Alliance, African American Leadership Alliance, the League of Women Voters, and the Chamber of Commerce.
So the whole idea was that these groups would work together, they would do some outreach, have a couple of public forums, they're conducting a survey, and there would be community input that would come back to the council. Now there's a time frame that we all need to be aware of on this. This is going to go back to council on the 15th of this month. But the other important deadlines are that if there is going to be a change, the popular opinion is that the first step would be going to the federal courts to get approval for a referendum and then hold a referendum in the spring. January 3rd of 2012 is the deadline for council-initiated questions for a spring primary. And again, the popular opinion is that to do that, there would have to be some court action beforehand. The spring primary is March 20th. Our deadline for having these maps done, regardless of how many districts they are, regardless of how people are elected, is November of 2012. We have to have the maps done so people can know what districts they're going to run for in the election for the spring of 2013. So those are some of the time frames that we have to consider.